you to... Okay. Allora, attendo ovviamente le vostre domande. Io vorrei cominciare con una domanda al regista e chiedergli, ecco, come nasce questa storia, come ha scoperto questa teoria bizzarra e interessante al tempo stesso, e ecco, da cosa nasce la volontà di occuparsi di questo tema?
Well, I just looked at world history basically and saw how many great accomplishments that have been done by drunk people. That was the beginning. That's back in 2013. Then it developed, of course. After having realized many of all these virtues that alcohol can bring, we also realized that alcohol can kill people, destroy families, destroy societies, and our exploration became wider. And then we continued into actually trying to make a film about life. I guess these people have come to a place in their life where they've lost curiosity, they've lost inspiration, they've lost the element of risk and have been caught up by repetitiousness. And they use the alcohol to regain their lives, so to speak. So, in all humbleness, we wanted to make a life-affirming movie.
Vorrei chiedere a Magnus Millang e Mads Mikkelsen, ecco, la loro reazione quando hanno letto la sceneggiatura, che cosa hanno trovato di così interessante in questa storia e nei loro personaggi come dire, e nel percorso umano di questi personaggi.
Thank you. Well, I must say, the first time I read the script, I loved it instantly, and said, let's go out and shoot it now, because the story is so solid and good. So the last and the easiest thing was to shoot it. I could relate to that, sitting, having a lunch and have one glass of wine, and all the, what do you call it, confusion or stress you have, minor stress during a workday, fell into place and calm. And I guess we all know that feeling, how it is when you have one glass of wine, and I thought that was very funny. And the script also had that philosophy about life, that you should, if you are in a relationship, well, when you wake up, take an extra look at that someone you love.
Yeah, Thomas pitched it to me early on before I saw a script. And at that point it was just an idea. And instead of being 4 high school teachers, they had different jobs. And my job was specifically working in the airport in the control tower, which was obviously insanely funny and a base for a lot of crazy ideas. But I also knew that was just that was the excuse to make a story about life, which is obviously what Thomas always does, and in this case about embracing life and regaining your life. And Thomas has an extraordinary ability to put ordinary people into extraordinary situations, and that's why we can all relate to these stories.
Ci sono delle domande dalla sala, allora 1 e 2.
Sì, salve. Capivamo solo il parere dell'ingegnere, domanda naturalmente per il regista. Volevo chiedere quanto può essere stata di ispirazione per questo film anche alla commedia italiana classica, che fa ridere, fa pensare, però ha come ingrediente fondamentale anche un pizzico di cattiveria, e se diciamo il film può essere visto anche come struttura narrativa, come una commedia sentimentale classica, ma non fra 2 persone, ma fra l'essere umano e la gioia di vivere, quindi con un forte innamoramento iniziale straordinario, poi una forte crisi anche con i problemi che vengono dall'alcol e anche con un decesso, e poi con un trionfo finale dove si celebra la gioia di vivere, compresa la morte, che è parte integrante di una vita, naturalmente.
Well, Mads keeps telling me that I've made an Italian movie, which I find really interesting. They do speak Danish, but there's possibly an Italian vibe in this film. Of course, some of my greatest heroes are from Italy: Pasolini, Fellini. Are people that I've admired throughout my career, and maybe there's a sense of relationship between this movie and those masters of cinema. I can only hope so. I don't see this movie as a comedy. I don't really know what this movie is yet. Maybe you know it better than I do. But hopefully it's a movie about life in a sense that makes us inspired by life again. It's funny, yes, but it starts with a great tragedy that can overcome all of us. A tragedy of people who've lost their lives and who are very lonely. And possibly that's where the most funny scenes are to be found, in the great tragedies. What defines this movie, I guess, is the end. People have asked me, is he flying or is he falling? To me, he's flying. He's liberated. He's dancing. It's ecstasy. He's won his life back, and he's flying into a new era of his life together with his wife. I guess that would be a great end for a romantic comedy as well.
Allora, prima della domanda, qui intanto le portiamo il microfono, vorrevo collegarmi proprio a quello che diceva Thomas adesso a proposito della scena finale. Aspettiamo per tutto il film che Mads Mikkelsen balli e finalmente alla fine balla. Ecco, se ci potete raccontare un po' di quella scena, come l'ha costruita e che anche noi percepiamo come molto liberatoria.
It was always in the script, but there was also a couple of different versions that was on play somehow. A bus that he might catch or not catch. There was different versions, but the dance was obviously Thomas's favorite. For me, I was a little reluctant for a few reasons, because it is a fairly realistic film, and I always thought it was like, it's tricky to pull it off. It can come across as pretentious, something we want to show. But once he kept saying, well, that's the way it is, Mads, and I gave up, and when I finally saw the film, I must just agree that I was terribly wrong, and he was absolutely right. It's absolutely the best ending of a film I've ever done. But I had a hard time to see that.
But since I was right, would you want to dance for us again?
Depending on how much cash you guys have in your pocket.
C'è una domanda lì, prego.
Buongiorno, Marta Zoiporetti per lasciamiapenso.com. La mia domanda è per Thomas Vinterberg e anzitutto vorrei ringraziarvi tutti, perché in realtà invece credo che per uno spettatore italiano vedere un film in totale assenza di moralismo sia un'esperienza molto anomala e anche conturbante. La mia domanda è inevitabile per quanto mi riguarda, vorrei chiedere a Thomas Vinterberg rispetto al momento in cui avete scritto il manifesto, il voto di castità di Dogma 95, cosa è cambiato nel tuo cinema e se qualche comandamento dei 10 comandamenti del voto di castità è ancora particolarmente valido per quanto riguarda i tuoi film.
Well, Dogma 95 is 25 years ago. Back then we wanted to undress the cinema, and not unlike this movie, we imposed a risk and an experiment to our lives. It's pretty much like this movie, actually. There was danger connected to making that movie of Festa, and Dogma 95 was considered crazy by our colleagues. People called me and said, "You're committing creative and career-wise suicide. Don't do it. And you're destroying cinema, and you're destroying your own cinema," and all of that. And the sensation of doing this together, jumping off a cliff, doing something suicidal together, was the ultimate sense of solidarity and togetherness. And I think there's a clear parallel in our movie, which I didn't think about when I was writing it. Now, Dogma was a revolt against the existing conservative, mediocre filmmaking. And then in Cannes in '98, it was an attempt to undress the movie, and in Cannes in '98, it became a massive success, and suddenly it was fashion. The danger disappeared, the nudity disappeared, and it became a beautiful dress. So if I was doing a Dogma film now, it wouldn't be naked, it wouldn't even be a beautiful dress, it would be a very old dress. It would be strange. It would be unexplorative. It has been done. So what I've brought from back then, and which I was already doing before Dogma, was looking for purity, vulnerability, and humanity in the way those two actors very beautifully provide. And yes, the camera's handheld in this movie, but not because of Dogma.
Ci sono delle domande? Intanto io ho una curiosità, se durante diciamo, le riprese del film avete provato personalmente la validità di questa teoria?
No. What we did, well, you can talk about our rehearsal period. That was pretty nice. There was alcohol involved in the rehearsal period.
We had to drink, and I was obviously the best in drinking. Yeah, and we have to test where we're at different sort of what do you call it? Levels of drunkenness, and the most difficult part was to be extremely drunk. We're very afraid of being a sketch. So that was the worst, or the most thing I was most nervous about this film was playing really, really drunk, and the tool was to be what do you call it? United with this might be horrible.
We watched a lot of Russian videos for some reason.
I mean, this is the rehearsals, right? And so obviously when you start shooting a film, you might be able to be slightly drunk in one scene, but it doesn't really work because after that scene, you're shooting the scene where you're driving a car, so you just can't go there. But together, the four actors, director and co-writer, we have a couple of 100 years of experience with alcohol, so that came in handy as well. But it was interesting to see what happened to our speech, to what happened to our way of moving when it was 0.5, 0.8, and as Magnus says, he was by far the best at drinking.
So, acting is a lot about hiding what you want to show, actually. If you want to show an actor who's in love, he'll play that he doesn't care by hiding that he's in love. And it's the same thing with drinking. You hide that you're drunk. To begin with, you sit straight and you measure your movements, and maybe there's a little bit of a fall, but that's all, right? And that's fine up until 0.9, 1.2 or something. And from then on, it becomes this, as I normally say, this tragic ballet. And there were some practicalities we had to find out. Like, because when you fall, when you're very drunk, you don't protect yourself. You just fall. That's where the stuntmen came in. And I could see in their eyes that they weren't as drunk as their bodies. That's where the makeup artist comes in with some chemicals to put in their eyes and stuff. You know, it took a lot of preparation.
C'è una domanda in sala?
Sì, innanzitutto volevo fare Volevo fare i complimenti per questo film che è assolutamente centrato, e il motivo principale di questi complimenti è legato al fatto che lo ritengo un film estremamente coraggioso, un film che affronta appunto un argomento che è ancora tabù, quello dell'alcolismo. Ecco, alla base di questo volevo dire, se anche nella vostra società questo argomento è così difficile da affrontare, innanzitutto, e poi se i 4 protagonisti che sono stati scelti come figure professionali rappresentano un po' la nostra civiltà occidentale, diciamo, lo psicologo, lo storico, l'artista e lo sportivo. Se è questo oltrepassare il limite, come ci è stato insegnato in alcune forme di letteratura, è per voi un messaggio positivo o negativo? Grazie.
Well, starting with your last question, my clever wife, she's in the movie. She's the one he's pissing on. But she's also in Denmark a priest. In Denmark we have female priests because we're not Catholics. And she tells me that this movie is about the uncontrollable. When you put the bottle to your lips, you enter a room of the uncontrollable, such as an example of the uncontrollable is falling in love. You fall, you lose control over your body, and something grand happens that you can't plan for, buy on the internet, or read in any papers or anywhere. You can't even measure it. Getting an idea is another example of the uncontrollable. And I think that's more important to me than the alcoholism of the movie. And apparently, to answer your first question, it's also more important for the audience. It seems that they're not very provoked by this film. We asked them, we've done surveys, and they don't think it's provocative. They find it moving. And I think they find it moving because these guys are battling to get their lives back. And for some it succeeds, and for others it has fatal consequences. Your analysis about the 4 archetypes of Western civilization is beautiful, and I am open to it, but I'll leave it to you. It's open for translations, and if there's like 360 people in a theater, there'll be 360 interpretations of the movie. This one is yours, and it's beautiful. Thank you.
E dal momento che appunto Thomas citava sua moglie, attrice del film, vorrei che ci raccontasse un po' del ruolo delle donne in questo film, che sono forse quelle che cercano di riportare alla razionalità, non so se è giusto dire così, alla razionalità i loro uomini, un invito a riprendere il controllo delle loro vite. Come li ha concepiti i personaggi femminili? Che cosa rappresentano per lei?
Well, they're in 2 different situations. There's a younger female, which is his wife, and then there's a midlife female, which is his wife. I think if we go for the younger one, which happens to be my wife in real life, I think she's very open. She likes this experiment. I see that when she enters the room, she's like, "Are you guys drunk?" And she's kind of liking it. Up until he starts pissing in the bed. I find her very flexible, actually, up until a certain point. And I do think that their relationship has gained from this thing that they've been on their way into the sense of repetitiousness, but they haven't got entirely caught up by it yet. And they're being saved by it. If we look at Mads' relationship with his wife, and correct me when I say something wrong, I see 2 very lonely people. And I see they have a sense of grand love between them, continuous love, but they've grown lonely. They've lost the element of exploring together as well. Repetitiousness is very dangerous for relationships. It's very dangerous for the erotic life. And they're suffering from that. So they miss each other. And I actually see her in the same way as I see him in that situation. Having said that, I must emphasize that when I make a movie, it comes from curiosity or some sort of inspiration, and not from any political debate or gender debate or moral obligation. I claim immunity from that when I'm making my movies, whether it's this movie about 4 men or my previous movie, which is mainly about a woman.
E mi chiedevo anche questo, in effetti all'inizio si vede che se il tasso alcolico nel sangue di questi personaggi si mantiene basso, i vantaggi sono moltissimi e i vantaggi non solo per se stessi ma per gli altri, cioè queste persone riescono a regalare gioia a tutte le persone che hanno annoiato o deluso fino a quel momento, no? La moglie del personaggio di Mads Mikkelsen, ma anche il bambino che trova un alleato straordinario nel suo professore di ginnastica. Quindi, come dire, la domanda è, ma quindi è una questione di trovare il giusto equilibrio?
You're talking about the right way of drinking, or the right way of living, or both?
Di trovare la misura che consente di trarre il massimo dal consumo di alcol in questo caso.
Okay, let's start with alcohol. Alcohol comes in phases. There's phase 1, where you become an elevated version of yourself, as you see in the beginning of the movie. Then there's phase 2, where you have to drink to become yourself again. And there's a very invisible transition from phase 1 to phase 2. Suddenly you need your glass of wine at lunch to avoid being grumpy or to avoid yelling at your kids. That's where you're in phase 2. Then there's phase 3 where you start shaking and you have to drink to avoid physical problems. And I strongly recommend staying in phase 1. It's that simple. And when you realize that you're in phase 2, which you may realize pretty late, stop for a while and start over in phase 1. That's how I see it. If we talk about life, it's a bit more complicated. But if I should make a simple answer, I think it's about putting things at risk. If you feel the welfare, routine, the sense of repetitiousness, if you feel that it's killing you, put things at risk, explore, even though whether it's in bed with your wife or your husband, or whether it's at work as a school teacher. You have to fight for your curiosity by putting things at risk, I guess.
Ci sono delle domande? Sì, una domanda qui.
Hi, good morning. Federico Grandesso, New Europe. How did you prepare this movie? I'm very interested about the research process and how did you, I don't know, how was the preparation of the world of drunk? If you met someone that...
Well, the writer, Tobias Lindholm, and myself, we drank a lot of Coca-Cola Zero. And then we went out to pick up our children from kindergarten. And then we went home to do some cooking. And then occasionally we had time to write a little bit of the script. And possibly this script is a little bit of a reaction against the rational Danish life. Though we have great lives, life is very rarely uncontrollable. And I think this whole project is a fight for the uncontrollable. living a very controlled life myself, it was a great liberation writing the script.
Ci sono dei film, a parte appunto questa insomma, ispirazione italiana, sembra un film italiano, ma insomma a parte questo, ci sono dei film che in qualche modo le sono stati di aiuto nella scrittura, nella realizzazione, le hanno fatto, sono stati da guida, diciamo così, a cui ha voluto rendere omaggio?
Well, Le Grand Bouffe, we looked at that. We looked at Fight Club, because it has similarities. And we looked at Husbands by Cassavetes. And apparently, according to Mads, some Italian movies has been boiling in the back of our heads, which I think is right, actually.
But it's never been about the inspiration of the film. It's always been, for me, when I saw it was always the feeling of Italian films, no matter how brutal it is, no matter how sad the story is, there is something larger than life in Italian films in general, at least when I grew up, that has a tribute to life always. Even though it's dark, it never makes us leave the movie theater with darkness. And that's what I thought about Thomas's film. He's always had that in him, but this was the most obvious version I've ever seen him do.
I think if a vehicle would be sent into the universe with things about life on Earth, 8.5 would be on that vehicle by Fellini. I love and adore it, and I found him a grand master, and I'm sure there's been some inspiration from his movies as well.
E poi mi piacerebbe sapere anche come è nata quella bellissima idea del gioco di chi voteresti tra i candidati. A un certo punto il professore di storia fa ecco, com'è nata quell'idea dei 3 candidati?
It's a joke.
Yeah, but sì, ma è un gioco, è molto più di un gioco.
I agree. It's a joke which turns life upside down in the sense that the rational human being is not necessarily the good human being. And that's, of course, that's what's interesting about that joke. I think it was my co-writer who came up with it. And that's why Mads' character says that things aren't always what they seem. Look out for the irrational person, because that may be where the heart is, I guess. If we should find a message in that joke, yeah.
E allora io ringrazio Magnus Millang, Mads Mikkelsen e Thomas Vinterberg per essere stati oggi con noi. Molte grazie.